Mark Coleman. If you want to understand how dangerous early MMA was, start with Mark Coleman, a Division I national champion wrestler from Ohio State. Coleman brought something to the cage that changed everything: the concept of ground and pound. Not submission grappling, not trying to out-technique someone on the mat, just pure, overwhelming force from top position. Coleman would take you down, and it wasn't a question of if, but when. And then he would rain down elbows, forearms, and fists until the referee pulled him off or you stopped moving. In 1996, Coleman won the UFC 10 tournament. In February 1997, he won UFC 11. 4 months later, he won UFC 12. 3 tournament victories in less than a year and a half. But here's what the highlight reels don't show you. Every time Coleman drove someone into the mat, every time he absorbed a counterstrike, every time he pushed his body beyond its limits, he was accumulating damage that wouldn't manifest for years. The human body wasn't designed for what he was doing. Not at that frequency, not with that intensity. By his mid-30s, Coleman was already dealing with chronic pain. His neck, his back, his joints, all deteriorating from years of extreme physical trauma. He's spoken openly about the toll those early years took, about the surgeries, about waking up in pain every single day. Mark Coleman helped create modern MMA, but modern MMA nearly destroyed him. Don Frye. If Mark Coleman was about power, Don Frye was about something even more primal: pure toughness. A former amateur boxer and wrestler, Frye entered the UFC with one simple strategy: walk forward and break you. No fancy footwork, no elaborate game plans, just relentless, brutal aggression, backed by an iron chin and an indestructible will. His fight against Yoshihiro Takayama in Pride 21 is legendary, and for all the wrong reasons. For the first minute, both men simply stood in the pocket and traded bombs. No defense, no strategy, just two men trying to knock each other unconscious through sheer force of will. The crowd went insane. Commentators called it the greatest display of heart they'd ever seen. What they should have called it was criminal. Frye absorbed hundreds of significant strikes in his career. Elbows that would have hospitalized most people, punches that would have ended fights in a more regulated era, and he just kept coming. His career in top-level MMA lasted less than 5 years. By the time he was done, his body was wrecked. Multiple concussions, broken bones that never healed properly, neurological issues that he still deals with today. Don Frye became a legend by refusing to quit, and that refusal cost him decades of normal life. If you're starting to understand just how different this era was, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, because what comes next gets even more intense, and you won't want to miss where this story goes. Oleg Taktarov. While American fighters were building the sport on wrestling and boxing, Russia sensed something different. Oleg Taktarov, a combat sambo champion, Taktarov represented a different philosophy, where Coleman used overwhelming power and Frye used unstoppable pressure. Taktarov used patience and opportunism. He would survive chaos, endure punishment, and wait for his moment. At UFC 6, Taktarov fought 3 times in one night, 3 fights, one evening, against fresh opponents each time. His final fight that night was against Tank Abbott, a street fighter famous for his raw power and complete disregard for his own safety. The fight was brutal, bloody, exhausting. It went over 15 minutes with no rounds, no breaks, just continuous violence. Taktarov won by rear naked choke. Then he collapsed. What most people don't know is that Taktarov considered retiring after that night, not because he lost, he won the tournament, but because he understood something that few fighters of that era did. This pace was unsustainable. You couldn't fight 3 times in one night, absorb that much damage, and expect your body to hold up. The human nervous system isn't designed for that level of repeated trauma. Taktarov was smart enough to see the writing on the wall. He transitioned into action movies, doing stunt work and small roles in Hollywood. He got out before the sport destroyed him completely, but many of his contemporaries weren't so fortunate. Igor Vovchanchin. If you want to see what unregulated violence looks like, watch Igor Vovchanchin fight. A Ukrainian fighter with a Kyokushin karate background, Vovchanchin fought 67 professional MMA fights. 67. For context, many modern UFC champions have fewer than 30 fights in their entire career. His record between 1995 and 2005, 56 wins, 10 losses, 1 no contest. Vovchanchin's striking was terrifying. Short, compact punches with enough power to shut down anyone who stood in front of him. He fought in an era where fights could be stopped due to cuts, exhaustion, or simple inability to continue, but rarely because someone tapped to strikes. He competed in tournaments where the rules explicitly allowed headbutts, where soccer kicks to downed opponents were standard, where knees to the head of a grounded fighter weren't just legal, they were expected. The man absorbed incredible punishment across nearly 7 decades of fights, and while he was never knocked out cold, the accumulation of subconcussive impacts, the kind that don't drop you but still damage your brain, was staggering. Today, Vovchanchin lives quietly in Ukraine. He's spoken about memory problems, about the difficulty of concentration, about the price he paid for those 67 fights. Igor Vovchanchin became a legend by never backing down, and that legend came at a cost we're only now beginning to calculate. Yuki Nakai. Some stories in early MMA aren't just about toughness or skill. Some are about sacrifice that goes beyond comprehension. December 1995, Tokyo, Japan, Vale Tudo Japan Tournament. Yuki Nakai, a 172-pound Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, entered a tournament with no weight limits. His first opponent was Gerard Gordeau, a Dutch savate fighter who weighed over 210 pounds. What happened next is one of the most controversial moments in MMA history. During the fight, Gordeau eye-gouged Nakai repeatedly, not accidentally, not once, multiple times, with clear intent. Nakai's right eye was permanently damaged. He would later lose all vision in that eye. But here's the part that defines early MMA, for better or worse. Nakai didn't tell anyone. He didn't withdraw from the tournament. He couldn't see out of his right eye, and he fought 2 more times that same night. He won both fights. He won the entire tournament, blind in one eye. When doctors finally examined him afterward, they were horrified. The damage was permanent, irreversible. Nakai would never see out of that eye again. He was 27 years old. Yuki Nakai never fought professionally in MMA again, not because he couldn't, but because he'd given everything the sport could possibly take from him. Today, he runs a grappling academy in Tokyo. He teaches, he mentors, and he carries the physical reminder of an era that asked for everything and gave back only scars and stories. If this story is hitting different than you expected, go ahead and leave a like on this video, because we're about to talk about why everything had to change and what it took to get there. By the late 1990s, the cracks were showing. Senator John McCain famously called MMA human cockfighting and led a campaign to ban it in all 50 states. Cable companies refused to air events. Major venues wouldn't host fights. The sport was hemorrhaging legitimacy and money. But that wasn't the only crisis. Fighters were breaking down at an alarming rate. Men in their early 30s with the bodies of 50-year-olds. Chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, wasn't even in the public consciousness yet, but fighters were already showing symptoms: memory loss, mood swings, depression, neurological decline. The sport had to evolve or die. In 2000, the unified rules of mixed martial arts were introduced. Weight crosses, 5-minute rounds, banned techniques like headbutts, soccer kicks, and strikes to the back of the head, mandatory medical examinations, gloves designed to protect both fighters. Athletic commissions began regulating the sport state by state. Fighter safety became a priority, not just an afterthought. Medical suspensions started being enforced. Performance-enhancing drug testing became standard. The sport became safer, more legitimate, more marketable. But here's the uncomfortable truth. None of those changes would have happened if fighters hadn't sacrificed their bodies to prove they were necessary. The men we've talked about tonight didn't just build MMA, They built it with their health, their futures, and in some cases, their lives. Mark Coleman's chronic pain forced conversations about long-term fighter health. Don Frye's neurological issues highlighted the dangers of repeated head trauma. Yuki Nakai's blindness exposed the consequences of inadequate rules and oversight. They paid the price so that modern fighters wouldn't have to. Today, when you watch a UFC event, you're watching one of the most regulated combat sports in the world. Fighters have teams of coaches, nutritionists, and medical professionals. They have health insurance and retirement plans. They're protected by comprehensive rules designed to minimize, though never eliminate, the risk of catastrophic injury. This didn't happen by accident. It happened because men like Mark Coleman, Don Frye, Oleg Taktarov, Igor Vovchanchin, and Yuki Nakai stepped into the unknown. They fought without safety nets, without guarantees, without knowing what the consequences would be. Some became legends. Some became cautionary tales. Most became both. The question isn't whether their sacrifices were worth it. The question is whether we remember them, not just as highlight reels and knockout compilations, but as human beings who gave more than any sport should ever ask. The next time you watch a fighter step into the cage, remember, they're standing on the shoulders of giants who can barely stand at all. If this changed how you see the sport, subscribe to the channel for more stories the highlight reels won't tell you. Drop a comment about which fighter from this era you'd like me to cover next, and I'll see you in the next one.